Hi, today I'd like to show you how to paint in Rust. Whenever we pick up a new hobby, we need to learn how to use the tools and the medium first. So today I'd like to show you all of the paintable objects in game, some useful info about them, on how to acquire them or craft them, and of course, how to use Paint UI. So let's get started. Before we start with the Paint UI, we should know what objects can we use to paint and interact in game. So here are all the objects that you can use to paint in Rust. I will leave some useful info on the left side of the screen. The first object is a personal favorite of mine, an XL picture frame. It requires a one wall to fit. The next one is an XXL picture frame and it requires 2 walls. Then moving on to the smaller ones, we have a portrait picture frame, landscape picture frame, and a tall picture frame. Perfect to fit in those small places in your base. The next pack is related to photos. They have 2 purposes. You can either store photos in them or paint on them. The first one is the portrait photo frame, then the landscape photo frame, and the large photo frame. Next few signs have to be placed on the ground. We have a single signpost, double signpost, a one-sided town signpost, two-sided town signpost, and a large banner on a pole. These can be only placed on the ground and you cannot place them on your foundations. The next from the banners is this large hanging banner. It requires 3 walls to be placed. It's sometimes very tricky to place it, but I like to make like a floor frame and jump on it and then place it on a wall. The next object is a carvable pumpkin that can be also lit up. These couple of frames you might be familiar because they can be crafted and learned on a workbench. This is a small wooden sign, medium wooden sign, a large wooden sign, and a huge wooden sign. This is a spinning wheel that can be painted on, but you can also interact with it and it spins. Next up, we have a 2-sided hanging sign and a 2-sided ornate hanging sign. Perfect for your little house. Next ones are the neon signs. We have a couple of sizes. This is a small neon sign, a medium neon sign, an animated neon sign. It only has 3 frames to animate, and of course all of these require electricity, a large neon sign, and a large animated neon sign. This one has 5 frames to animate. For now, these are all the signs that you can use in game to paint and decorate your base. So now that we know the objects that we can use to paint, let's learn how to use a Rust Paint UI. I would like to show you first what each one of these buttons do and how you can use them to paint. The first button on our UI is a clear the canvas. It's very self-explanatory. You click on it and it clears your canvas completely. But don't be afraid if you clicked on this by accident, because you can use this button here to undo, or you can simply press Ctrl Z to go back. The next button saves the current image to your desktop. So if you want to save your artwork and maybe have it for future or add it to the modded servers where you can bring them back, you can use this feature to get the artwork for the next swipe. The next button is Save your current stages to sign and continue editing. It's a very important thing to do when playing on any server because you can suddenly die of hunger or you get a naked hitting you with a rock while you're painting. So it's very important to save your work constantly and update it. You can also press Ctrl S on your keyboard to quickly save your progress, which is something that I prefer the most. There is also save changes on the bottom right, but the difference is the save button up here continues using the canvas and save exits you from the canvas. The next two buttons are undo and redo. You can also use Ctrl Z or Ctrl Y depending on what your keybinds are to help you fix those mistakes you've done. If by any chance we moved our canvas awkwardly and we want to return it back to the original position, we don't have to keep on spinning the canvas like we used to before. We can simply click on this reset camera position and rotation to continue painting. Sometimes when we're painting, the flare can be really hard on a canvas, and some of the colors are not showing the way they are supposed to be. So finally we have a toggle lighting that helps us see the painting without the strong flare. The next button is very simple, it's toggle chat. So when we turn it on, we can type and talk to our friends. Now I'm talking to myself, but it's okay. Moving on to the right side, we have a paintbrush, eraser, and color picker. Paintbrush is a brush that we use to paint our images, and eraser erases it. You can use color picker to pick that perfect color in the middle and create a new one. After you've color picked something, it automatically switches to the paintbrush. The cool tip about the color picker is that you can press and hold and slide it all over your canvas to pick the color that you need, and you can look at the bottom right to see which color it's currently picking. Now let's look at the brush palette over here. In the first row, we have a number of brushes that we can use to paint. Each one of them have their own different abilities and shapes for you to use during your painting process. The size indicates the size of the brush that we're gonna be using. So the low numbers are the small brush size, and the bigger numbers are the big brush size. Interesting thing to know, if you have a specific brush size that you prefer, you can just type in the number and continue painting. Spacing indicates the distance of the brush alpha that we're using. So for example, if we have a big spacing, you will notice that these little circles are getting more spaced out, and the smaller the spacing is, smoother the line will be as the alpha is much closer. The opacity slider shows us how much of the color is gonna be visible on your canvas. So with the low opacity, we are going to get the very soft brush strokes, and with the higher opacity, we will get a much stronger color and saturation. So let's take a look how we can use each of these brushes in different situations and how I personally love to use them. Starting off with the first brush, it's the softest brush on this palette, and I personally love using it for getting gradients. You can use them for making skies, for example, or making any kind of interesting soft transitions in your paintings. By using it with the highest size and and a medium opacity, you can get a really nice blending going. I like to use it very often to get this magic glow in the painting. The second brush is the brush that I use the most. It's the most versatile brush with the very soft corners that is a bit less intimidating than the third brush on our list because it gives me that very soft feeling that's almost like a drawing on a paper. The settings that I'm using for sketching is usually something of very low brush size, very low opacity for the undersketch, and then you use a higher opacity to refine your drawing. I also like to use this brush to make a details on the painting or for rendering without having sharp edges but soft enough to give it a nice transition between colors. The third brush on our list has a really sharp edge, so it's perfect for very precise drawings or signs. Also great for covering large surfaces and getting that background color. If you put the size to the maximum, opacity to the maximum, we can now quickly paint the entire canvas in just a couple of strokes. I personally use it when I have some designs that require sharp edges and bold colors. The fourth brush looks like a square, and if you use it with the big size, you can do a lot of amazing signs. You notice I keep going back and forth with Ctrl Z and clicking, Ctrl Z, clicking to get that straight line. The next brush can be also defined as a very painterly brush, as the edges of it are very soft and fuzzy. You can get some really interesting textures with it depending on which size or spacing you're using. I like to use it with high spacing and a little bit stronger opacity to get those background details that don't require really sharp edges, but it also makes it a really good blending brush. Speaking of great blending brushes, we have the last two that are kind of similar but have very different shape. Second to last brush has a shape that looks like a snowflake. If you hold it, it will rotate just a little bit. The next brush has a much stronger middle and a softer outside, so it's really perfect to get some cool effects in your drawing. I like to use these brushes when I need to blend something, but also give it a little bit of texture, like here where I want to show some sun rays. They also make for great blending brushes. For example, you can get some grass texture or water texture, and they just blend really beautifully. You can move your canvas by holding Shift and right-click. It's very useful, for example, when you reset the camera position, it kind of centers your painting in the middle of the UI, but I personally like to move it in the middle of my monitor. You can zoom in and zoom out on the pieces using scroll wheel. Another interesting thing to know is that Paint UI now scales with the user interface. So now when we enter the canvas, these buttons are going to be much smaller. If you want to increase number of undos, you can do by typing global sign undo buffer and set it to 1000. Thank you, Creative, for giving us this tip. Next tip that DaVinci and BlueJay on Math have given us is if you want to take a really cool screenshot but you have this Rust UI open, you can bind F5 to graphics HUD 0, and then if you press it again, it will open the graphics HUD again. So let's check that out. F5, you can take a really clean screenshot, and press F5 again. The next cool trick comes from Holagato about how to get different colors in the neon signs. If you would like to know more about it, I recommend checking her YouTube video where she explains how you can get them. If you would like to know more tips and tricks about Rust painting, but also check out other people's artworks and just hang out with the art community, I recommend joining our Art of Rust Discord. We have gathered over 600 creative individuals that not only do the painting, but we have builders, skin makers, map makers, plugin makers, content creators, any creative individual, and anyone is really welcome to join us. So check out our website if you would like to join our Discord. And also, if you enjoyed this tutorial, please let me know in the comments if you would like to see more, and if there is anything specific that you would like to know about drawing in Rust. Thank you so much for watching. I wish you a lovely day and happy painting!